The auctioneer's gavel fell with a hollow thud that seemed to echo through Sarah's very soul. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $1. $1. That's all she was worth to the world now. Sarah Mitchell, though she supposed that wasn't her name anymore, stood frozen on the courthouse steps as murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Her father's debts had finally caught up to the family, and everything they owned was being sold to pay the creditors. Everything, including her. It wasn't slavery. The judge had been careful to explain. It was an indentured servitude contract to work off the remaining debt. 7 years of labor in exchange for room, board, and the clearing of her family's name. 7 years of her life, sold for a $1 bill. She turned to see who had bought her future, expecting to find one of the local businessmen or perhaps a family from town looking for domestic help. Instead, her eyes met those of a tall, weathered man she'd never seen before. He had the kind of face that spoke of hard work and harder winters, angular cheekbones, sun-weathered skin, and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes were clean but well-worn, the uniform of a working man rather than a wealthy landowner. As the crowd dispersed, he approached her slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Miss Mitchell? I'm Jacob Thornfield. I own the Double T Ranch, about 20 miles north of here." He removed his worn hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature gray. "I know this isn't conventional, but I want you to know that you'll be treated fairly on my land." Sarah found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "What exactly will you expect of me, Mr. Thornfield?" "Honest work for honest pay. Cooking, cleaning, maybe helping with the books if you've got the schooling for it." He paused, studying her face. "I'm not looking for anything more than that, if that's what you're worried about." Something in his tone made her believe him, though she couldn't say why. Perhaps it was the way he looked directly at her when he spoke, treating her like a person rather than property. Or maybe it was simply that she had no choice but to trust him. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Now, if you're ready. I've got a wagon waiting." Sarah glanced back at the courthouse where her father sat on the steps, his head in his hands. He'd gambled away their farm, their home, and finally her freedom, all chasing the dream of striking it rich in the silver mines. She felt a familiar stab of anger mixed with pity. "I'm ready," she said. The wagon ride to the Double T Ranch took most of the afternoon. Jacob. He'd insisted she call him by his first name. Wasn't much of a talker, but when he did speak, it was with thoughtfulness rather than empty chatter. He told her about the ranch, the cattle, the challenges of working the land in such an unforgiving climate. "Why did you bid on me?" Sarah finally asked as they crested a hill, and the ranch came into view below them. "You could have hired help the normal way." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his hand steady on the reins. "I suppose because I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go," he said finally. "And because nobody should be sold like livestock, no matter what the law says about it." The ranch house was larger than Sarah had expected. A 2-story structure built of local stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It looked solid and permanent. The kind of place that could weather any storm. Outbuildings dotted the landscape. A barn, bunkhouse, various sheds, and corrals where cattle grazed in the distance. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, and meant it. "It's home," Jacob replied simply. "You're home now, too, I suppose." As he helped her down from the wagon, their hands touched briefly. Sarah felt an unexpected warmth at the contact, a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. She pushed the feeling away immediately. She was here as an employee, nothing more. She couldn't afford to forget that. Jacob showed her to a small but comfortable room on the ground floor, with a window that looked out over the valley. It had a real bed, a washstand, and even a small desk with paper and ink. "This is yours," he said. "The door has a lock, and I expect you to use it whenever you want privacy. Your time after supper is your own, same as Sunday afternoons." "Thank you," Sarah said, surprised by her consideration. Most employers wouldn't have bothered with such niceties. That first evening, as Sarah prepared a simple meal from the well-stocked pantry, she found herself watching Jacob through the kitchen window. He moved among the animals with easy confidence, checking on horses, repairing a section of fence, always working even as the sun set behind the mountains. When he came in for dinner, he washed thoroughly at the pump outside and combed his hair with his fingers. Such small courtesies. But they suggested a man who understood that civilization was something you carried with you, not something imposed by circumstance. They ate in comfortable silence. The only sounds a soft clink of silverware and the settling of the old house around them. Finally, Jacob cleared his throat. "I should explain something," he said. "I know the terms of your contract say 7 years, but as far as I'm concerned, you're free to leave any time you want. I won't hold you to it." Sarah looked up from her plate, startled. "Why not? You paid good money." "I paid $1, Jacob interrupted. $1 for a human being's freedom. That's not ownership, Miss Mitchell. That's just complicated charity." For the first time since the auction, Sarah felt tears threaten. Not tears of despair this time, but something else entirely. Relief, perhaps, or the first fragile stirring of hope. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted quietly. "Then stay as long as you like," Jacob said. "But stay because you choose to, not because you have to." That night, as Sarah lay in her narrow bed listening to the sound of the ranch settling into darkness, she found herself thinking about her unexpected benefactor. Jacob Thornfield was nothing like what she'd expected. He was kind without being condescending, respectful without being distant, and despite the unusual circumstances that had brought her here, she felt safer than she had in months. For the first time since her father's gambling debts had begun mounting, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve constant fear and uncertainty. Perhaps here, on this remote ranch with this mysterious man who'd paid $1 for her freedom, she might actually find peace. She had no way of knowing that within a few short months, she would discover that some kinds of peace came at a price she wasn't prepared to pay. Spring arrived early at the Double T Ranch, and with it came a transformation that Sarah hadn't expected, not just in the landscape, but in herself. The work was hard but satisfying. She cooked hearty meals for Jacob and the handful of seasonal workers he employed during calving season. She kept the house clean and organized, managed the household accounts with precision that impressed even herself, and gradually began to understand the rhythms of ranch life. But it was the small moments that surprised her most. Jacob teaching her to ride properly on a gentle mare named Rosie. Evenings spent on the porch, watching storms roll across the vast sky, while they shared stories about their pasts. The way he never failed to thank her for meals, as if she were doing him a personal favor rather than fulfilling the terms of their arrangement. "You grew up in town," Jacob observed one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "What made your father try farming?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. Over the past 3 months, she'd grown comfortable with Jacob, but some wounds were still too fresh to examine closely. "He was a dreamer," she said finally, "always sure the next venture would be the one that made our fortune. First it was farming, then it was investing in the railroad, then the silver mines. He couldn't accept that steady, honest work was enough. And your mother? Died when I was 15. I think maybe if she'd lived, she could have talked sense into him." Sarah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Or maybe not. Some people are just born restless." Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "I used to be like that myself." "You?" Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. Jacob seemed like the most settled, grounded person she'd ever met. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" He smiled, and the expression transformed his usually serious features. "I spent 5 years after the war drifting from place to place, trying to find something that would fill the emptiness inside me. California, Oregon, even up to Alaska for a while. Took me a long time to learn that running towards something is different from running away." "What made you stop running?" "This place," he said simply. "Found it when I was passing through, and something about it just spoke to me. The previous owner was getting too old to work it, and he was willing to sell cheap to someone who'd take care of it properly. Been here 8 years now. Do you ever miss it? The traveling?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant peaks. "I miss the possibility of it. Sometimes. The idea that somewhere out there was a place where I'd finally belong completely. But I've learned that belonging isn't really about geography." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely, but his expression had returned to its usual composed mask. Still, she sensed layers beneath the surface that she was only beginning to glimpse. As spring turned to summer, Sarah found herself falling into the rhythms of ranch life with an ease that surprised her. She discovered she had a talent for working with the animals, particularly the horses. Jacob began teaching her more advanced riding techniques, and she spent her free time exploring the vast property, always with Rosie as her patient companion. "You're a natural," Jacob told her one afternoon as she successfully guided a young colt through his first lesson with a halter. "Have you ever thought about training horses professionally?" Sarah laughed, though the idea intrigued her more than she wanted to admit. "Women don't become horse trainers, Jacob. Besides, I'm here for 7 years, remember?" "I told you. You can leave any time you want," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "But I was thinking more along the lines of a partnership. I've been wanting to expand into horse breeding and training, with your touch for animals and my knowledge of the business side." He trailed off, leaving the suggestion hanging in the air between them. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, not just at the professional opportunity, but at the implication that he saw her as more than temporary help. That's quite an offer," she managed. "Think about it," Jacob said. "No pressure, but I believe we could build something good here together." That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about his words. Build something together. When was the last time anyone had asked her to be a partner in anything? Her father had made all the decisions about their family's future without consulting her, even when those decisions affected her directly. But Jacob was offering her a chance to be an equal contributor to something meaningful. More troubling was the way her pulse quickened whenever he was near, the way she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled at her. These feelings went far beyond professional partnership, and that frightened her. The turning point came in late July, during a particularly difficult week when 3 of Jacob's best mares were due to foal. Sarah had been helping with the births, working alongside Jacob through long nights in the barn. During the last and most complicated delivery, she found herself taking the lead while Jacob supported her decisions. When the foal finally arrived healthy and strong, they stood together in the straw, exhausted but exhilarated, in the golden lamplight, with bits of hay in their hair and their clothes wrinkled from the work. Sarah had never felt more herself. "We make a good team," Jacob said quietly, his eyes fixed on hers. "We do," she agreed, and suddenly the air between them felt charged with possibility. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered against her skin, and Sarah felt herself leaning into the touch. "Sarah," he said softly, and her name sounded different in his voice than it ever had before. She knew she should step back, remind them both that she was essentially his employee, that the power imbalance made any romantic entanglement complicated and potentially disastrous. Instead, she found herself moving closer. When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, as if he were still giving her the chance to change her mind. Sarah answered by kissing him back, pouring months of growing affection and desire into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Sarah whispered. "Only if we let it," Jacob replied. "Sarah, I want you to know this isn't about the contract or your situation here. This is about you and what's been growing between us these past months." She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there, along with vulnerability that made her chest tighten with affection. This strong, capable man was laying his heart bare for her, taking the same emotional risk she was. "I care about you too," she admitted. "More than I probably should." "Then maybe we should stop worrying about should and start thinking about want," Jacob said, his thumb tracing along her jawline. For the first time in her life, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future built on her own choices rather than other people's decisions. A future where she was valued not for what she could provide, but for who she was. A partnership of equals, in business and perhaps in life. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late August, carried by a postal rider who seemed eager to be on his way. Sarah was in the garden, harvesting tomatoes for lunch, when she saw Jacob emerge in the house with an open envelope in his hand and an expression she'd never seen before. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw had tightened into a hard line. When he looked up and saw her watching, something flickered across his features. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. "Sarah," he called, his voice strained. "Could you come inside? We need to talk." The word sent a chill down her spine. In the 3 months since their first kiss, since they'd begun building something real and beautiful together, Jacob had never sounded so formal with her. They'd grown past the need for careful politeness, settling into the easy intimacy of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. She set down her basket and walked toward the house, noting how Jacob's eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. Whatever that letter contained, it was serious enough to shake the confidence of the most steady man she'd ever known. Inside, Jacob paced the length of the kitchen, while Sarah took a seat at the table they'd shared for so many peaceful meals. The letter lay between them like an accusation, and she could see her name written in an unfamiliar hand across the top of the page. "Jacob, you're scaring me," she said finally. "What does it say?" He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his storm-gray eyes filled with something that looked like anguish. "It's from a lawyer in Denver, representing someone named Charles Whitmore." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Charlie Whitmore? But he died in a mining accident 2 years ago. Everyone said so." "Apparently not." Jacob's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the strain underneath. "According to this, he's very much alive, and he's claiming that you were legally married to him before your father's debts were settled." "That's impossible," Sarah said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt a sick certainty growing in her stomach. Her father had been desperate in those final weeks before the auction, willing to consider any option that might save the family from complete ruin. "He says the ceremony took place 3 days before the auction," Jacob continued, his knuckles white where he gripped the back of a chair. "That makes your sale illegal, since married women can't enter into indentured servitude contracts without their husband's consent." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I would have known if I was married. You can't just marry someone without their knowledge. You can if the bride's father signs the documents and claims she consented." Jacob's voice was hollow now, as if he were reading his own death sentence. "According to this, your father owed Whitmore a substantial gambling debt, and they settled it by arranging a proxy marriage." "Proxy?" Sarah's voice failed her completely. She sank back into her chair, her mind racing through those final chaotic days before the auction. Her father had been gone frequently, claiming he was trying to arrange loans or find buyers for their remaining possessions. She'd been so focused on her own fear and anger that she hadn't questioned his absences too closely. "Sarah," Jacob's voice was gentler now, and when she looked up, she saw that he'd moved closer. "I need to ask you directly. Did you know? Did you have any idea that this marriage might have taken place?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, seeing doubt creep into his expression, despite his obvious attempt to hide it. "You think I lied to you," she whispered. "I don't know what to think." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. "All I know is that if this letter is telling the truth, then everything we've built here is complicated. Legally, you might belong to another man." "Belong," Sarah repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "First I belonged to my father's debts, then to you, and now possibly to a man I thought was dead. Tell me, Jacob, when exactly do I get to belong to myself?" She saw him flinch at the accusation in her voice, but she was too hurt and angry to care. After months of careful trust-building, after allowing herself to believe that he saw her as an equal partner, he was looking at her with suspicion again. "That's not fair," Jacob said quietly. "You know I've never treated you as property. Haven't you?" Sarah stood again, pacing to the window that looked out over the ranch they'd been planning to build together. "You paid $1 for me, Jacob. $1. And now another man is claiming ownership, and you're asking if I knew about it, as if I might have been deceiving you this entire time." "I'm trying to understand the situation," Jacob said, and she could hear frustration creeping into his voice. "If you're legally married to someone else, then what we've been doing is adultery," Sarah finished for him. "Yes, I understand the implications." They stood in silence for a long moment, the easy intimacy they'd built over the summer crumbling around them. Finally, Jacob spoke again, his voice carefully neutral. Whitmore is demanding that you return to Denver immediately. He's threatening legal action against both of us if you don't comply. And what do you think I should do? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from the defeat in his posture. I think. Jacob paused, clearly struggling with the words. I think we need to determine the legal facts before we make any decisions. If you're truly married to this man, then staying here puts us all at risk. I see. Sarah's voice was steady now, though inside she felt as if everything solid in her life was dissolving. So you wanted to go to Denver and sort this out. I want you to be free to make your own choices, Jacob said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. If this marriage is real, then you need to know the truth of your situation. My situation. Sarah laughed bitterly. My situation is that I'm 22 years old, and I've never made a single important decision about my own life. My father arranged my education. My father made our family financial decisions. My father apparently arranged my marriage. And now you're suggesting I go sort out a legal mess that was created entirely without my knowledge or consent. She turned to face him fully, and Jacob took a step back at the fury in her eyes. But you want to know what the worst part is, Jacob? The worst part is that for a few months, I actually believed that someone saw me as more than just a problem to be managed or a possession to be claimed. I thought you understood that I was capable of making my own decisions, of being a real partner. But at the first sign of trouble, you're ready to ship me off to deal with yet another man's claim on my life. Sarah, that's not. Yes, it is. Her voice was quiet now, but her words cut deep. Because if you truly believed I was your equal, if you truly trusted me, you would have asked what I wanted to do about this situation. Instead, you've already decided that the safest course is to send me away. The Denver lawyer's office smelled of tobacco and old leather, with heavy curtains that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. Sarah sat in an uncomfortable chair across from a desk piled high with legal documents, trying to maintain her composure, while Charles Whitmore outlined his version of their relationship. He was not at all what she had expected. Where her memories had painted him as a rough mining man, the person sitting before her was well-dressed and articulate, with the soft hands of someone who had never done hard labor. His supposed death, he explained, had been a convenient fiction that allowed him to escape his own debts and start fresh in California. Now that I've established myself in San Francisco, Whitmore was saying, I'm ready to claim what's rightfully mine, starting with my wife. I never consented to marry you, Sarah said for the third time. I had no knowledge of any ceremony. Your father had legal authority to act on your behalf. The lawyer interjected smoothly. The documents are all properly filed and witnessed. Sarah looked down at the marriage certificate in her hands, noting her father's signature next to a forged version of her own. The betrayal cut deep, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of clarity about her situation. And if I refuse to acknowledge this marriage? Whitmore leaned forward, his smile predatory. Then I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action against the rancher who's been harboring my wife. Kidnapping, adultery, theft of services. I'm sure we can find several charges that will stick. Jacob didn't kidnap me. He won a legal auction. An auction that was invalid due to your married status, the lawyer said. Any court would see it as conspiracy to defraud a husband of his rightful property. There was again property. Sarah felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time it was focused and purposeful rather than desperate. What exactly do you want from me? She asked Whitmore directly. I want you to come to California as my wife. Help me establish my new business. Bear my children. Be the respectable woman that success requires. He studied her appraisingly. You're more attractive than I remembered. Ranch life seems to have agreed with you. And if I refuse, then your rancher friend will face serious criminal charges. I have enough influence now to make sure he spends several years in prison. Whitmore's voice hardened. Don't test me on this, Sarah. I always collect what's owed to me. Sarah stood abruptly, the marriage certificate crumpling in her fist. I need time to consider my options. You have until tomorrow morning, Whitmore said. After that, I start proceedings against Thornfield. Outside the lawyer's office, Sarah walked the busy streets of Denver, her mind churning through possibilities. She could submit to Whitmore's demands, sacrifice her own happiness to protect Jacob from prosecution. She could fight the marriage in court, though the lawyer had made it clear that the legal system was unlikely to favor her word against documented evidence. Or she could choose a third option, one that was risky and would require more courage than she'd ever had to summon before. That evening, she sent 2 telegrams. The first went to Jacob, coming home. Trust me. The second went to Territorial Marshal's office in Colorado Springs, requesting an investigation into Charles Whitmore's alleged death and subsequent activities. The next morning, instead of appearing at Whitmore's hotel as expected, Sarah was on the first train back to the Double T Ranch. She arrived to find Jacob waiting on the platform, his face haggard with worry and sleepless nights. "Sarah, thank God," he said, reaching for her hands. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I failed you. You were right. I should have." "Later," she interrupted, though her heart lifted at the relief in his voice. "Right now, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Jacob studied her face, noting the new determination in her expression. "What do you need?" "I need you to marry me. Today, before Whitmore can get here with whatever legal papers he's planning to serve you with. Sarah, if you're already married." "I'm not," she said firmly. "That ceremony was a fraud, conducted without my knowledge or consent. But more importantly, I figure out why Charlie Whitmore is really pursuing this." She quickly explained her suspicions about Whitmore's business dealings, the convenient timing of his supposed death, and the likelihood that his new prosperity in California wasn't as legitimate as he claimed. "He needs a respectable wife to give him credibility," she concluded. "Someone with no connections who can't expose his past. But if I'm married to someone else, really married, with witnesses and proper documentation, then his claim becomes much more complicated to pursue legally." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Then, "Are you sure this is what you want? Not just as a legal strategy, but as a life?" Sarah looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw the vulnerability there, the fear that she might be acting out of desperation rather than love. "Jacob Thornfield," she said softly, "6 months ago you paid $1 for my contract. Today I'm offering you something worth infinitely more, my free choice. I choose you. I choose this life we've been building together. I choose to fight for what we have rather than surrender to men who think they can make decisions about my future without consulting me." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Then let's get married," he said simply. The ceremony took place that afternoon in the small church in town, with the preacher's wife and the general store owner serving as witnesses. Sarah wore the blue dress she'd been saving for special occasions, and Jacob had somehow managed to find wildflowers for her bouquet, despite the late season. As they exchanged vows, Sarah felt something settle into place inside her chest, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with legal maneuvering and everything to do with the man standing beside her, promising to love and protect her for the rest of their lives. When Whitmore arrived 3 days later with a sheriff's deputy and a warrant for Jacob's arrest, he found Sarah legally married and armed with telegraph confirmation that the territorial marshal was very interested in speaking with a man who had faked his own death to avoid debts. The confrontation was brief and decisive. Faced with a choice between pursuing a complicated and potentially unprofitable legal battle or fleeing before the marshal arrived, Whitmore chose retreat. The forged marriage certificate was torn up, the threatened charges were dropped, and Sarah found herself truly free for the first time in her adult life. That evening, as she and Jacob sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains they now owned together, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. "Do you regret it?" Jacob asked quietly. "The way we met, the circumstances." Sarah considered the question seriously. There had been so much pain and uncertainty, so many moments when she felt powerless and afraid. But those experiences had also taught her the value of choice, the importance of fighting for what mattered most.